Do you ever wonder why we live in a world with such change, such technological change, so much, yet things never really change? The real results don't happen, even though technology is changing. And have you ever heard that if you forget history, you'll be doomed to repeat it, to ignore history at your own peril? I was reminded about that last night. You see, I help my son coach his high school football team. My job with the team is all about creating the relationships among the teammates that will create a successful team atmosphere. And I use technology to do that. However, there was a history involved in this game last night. So the team my son coaches had never won a game against their crosstown rival. Never, ever. 10 years of losses, 10 years of negative history. Now, my son is in his first year of coaching this team, and he wanted to change that, to change the culture of losing. He wanted them not to think of themselves as losers, but winners. He wanted them to have the bragging rights for once in the town. And you ever wonder why those things never change, why it's so difficult? I have a theory that history favors continuity. History does not favor change. History itself will fight back against significant change. It's like a living person. History is alive. So the history here favored the continued losing of my son's team. Even though there was a new coach, that atmosphere really had not changed. History favored continued misery for his team, continued pain, and a continuance of being nobodies in their own hometown. To change history is hard. You have to fight like hell to get history to change. And history won't make it easy. It fights back. So last night, history met its match. After 10 years of losing and having never won against their crosstown rivals, my team, my son's team, won its first ever game versus a very confident and well-prepared team. They created a new history. Now, how did this happen? How did history fold its hand, and now there is a completely new history? The next meeting of these two teams, history will be on the side of my team, my son's team. A new historical reality will fight like hell against change.
Hi there. This is Tony Mascolo, mediator and recovering personal injury attorney. Those of you who know me or have watched earlier podcasts or have worked with me know that this business can beat you up. And, well, it did beat me up. And that's what I'm recovering from, the beatings that this business has inflicted upon me. And I say I'm recovering because I have now learned a better way to resolve cases. Different from what I did for almost 40 years. I have found the way to reduce caseloads, create certainty, and make satisfied clients. Wow, it's wonderful. And along the way, I've also found a way to make you a happier attorney or a happier adjuster, one who resolves more cases quickly and efficiently and keeps his clients happy. And you know what? I found out it's really not that hard. If you'd like to know how you can reduce your caseload, change the history of the way you have been doing business. That is the best way to reduce your caseload. If you'd like to know how to change the history and how you can enjoy more dinners with your family before 9 p.m. each night, I'll teach you how on every episode of Smart to Mediate. Do you want to streamline and reduce your caseload in the next 60 days? If you do, reach out to me and book a free consultation at www.smarttomediate.com/book a call, and we can discuss it. Now let's get back to the story. This story is about how difficult it is to change history. That history is a living being and it's going to fight you every step of the way.
You might be asking, what the heck does this have to do with today's podcast? Well, a successful attorney, adjuster, and claims personnel has to confront the history of our profession and change the history of the way cases have traditionally been resolved. And boy, that history is going to fight you every step of the way. It's not going to be easy, change history, but you must try if you want to accomplish a reduced caseload, making happier clients, reducing costs, creating time for yourself and your family outside of work. You see, litigation, a fight to the end proposition, it's trial by combat, and it can be replaced by mediation. Development of relationships need to be created. You need to have resolve to change history. And the development of relationships, you need to create them. You need to create relationships that avoid combative trials altogether. I have also found a way to make a happier you. And it's not that hard, but it does take a conscious effort to develop relationships. Changing history can be hard, but you changing to make a conscious effort to develop relationships that can change history, well, that's not so hard. And even if it's not intuitive to you to be a relationship creator or a relationship person, you can do it by making a focused effort to do it. So today we're going to look at the important relationship you will have either as a claims adjuster or an attorney with the mediator selected either by you for the case or by the courts for a presumptive mediation. These presumptive mediations are all the rage right now, and you get assigned by the court. You're not selecting the mediator. So what do you really know about the mediator? And that's not good. You should spend time developing a relationship with the mediator. And the mediator should welcome a relationship with you. A mediator who shuns a relationship with you should be avoided. This is not the old way of doing things where you created a bubble or a wall around the judge or a mediator, and any interaction was considered bad and could be conflictual. Let me tell you, that is so old school, and that feeds right into the litigation issues, the litigation stagnation, the cycle of litigation that just keeps getting recycled and recycled, and it feeds into this trial by combat. We want to change that. That whole scenario operates under the false premise that a mediator should be distant and not connected to the attorneys and claims adjusters. And I maintain that is just plain wrong. When you trust the mediator with your case, you need to determine if the mediator is a good fit for you and your case. The first mediation you do together is where you develop the relationship for the next mediation that you will be doing together, and the next mediation, and so on, for all additional mediations. You must always ask, at every stage of the mediation process, is this mediator really a good fit for not only the case, but if the mediator is a good fit for you? And there are at least 3 things you should always do when deciding if you are going to trust the mediator with your case. 1, does your mediator have a background that involves the area of law that surrounds your case? In other words, does the mediator have a claims, professional, or personal injury background? Simple, right? Knowing the business of claims and the business of personal injury claims will make the mediator focus on the important issues, the important matters, the important law to consider and avoid the noise that surrounds a lot of cases, the unimportant issues. And this is something you really need to take a good look at, especially now in the presumptive mediation areas where you're not selecting the mediator. And the way you would do that is by going to the court that selects the mediator for you. They will have an ADR list, and they will have a CV for each of the mediators. So that's one. Number 2, you need to develop your own relationship with the mediator. I don't care if the partner in your firm has a relationship with the mediator. I don't care if someone else tells you that this is a good mediator and a great person. You need to develop a relationship with the mediator. If there is a reluctance on the mediator's part to create a relationship with you, that is a huge red flag. I consider it a fatal flaw, and it's something you should consider a fatal flaw. There's something that I've learned that cannot be changed over time. Mediators that don't want to have a relationship with you, who make it all about slam, bang, let's get this case resolved, who aren't willing to put an effort into creating a relationship, that is a fatal flaw. And it doesn't change. That mediator is not good fit for you. And it is detrimental to the resolution of your cases and your goal of developing a plan to move or close as many cases as possible. After all, isn't closing cases what gives you control of your life? Isn't closing cases what brings happiness to your clients, your supervisors, your bosses? Isn't closing cases what makes you money? Isn't closing cases what gives you a leg up on the totem pole of success? Sure it is. Let's talk about the third thing. Does your mediator have a pre-mediation discussion with you to learn not only about the case, but also about you? Does your mediator not rush those pre-mediation discussions? And again, if your mediator does not have pre-mediation discussions, if your mediator is not willing to spend some time to get to know you and to share himself or herself with you so that you get to know your mediator, if that's not happening with your mediator, then it's a red flag and another one. And I would tell you another reason not to use that mediator. You want mediators that develop relationships among you and them, and you with your counsel that's opposing you on the case. You need to remember that mediators are not judges. Too often we treat the mediator like a judge. And you know what? Mediators are guilty of liking the way that feels. No, mediators are not judges. And a mediator who acts like a judge on your case should be avoided. See, mediators don't rule on the cases, on the law, don't decide on evidence that's going to come in or not. All of the things that judges do. Mediators don't tell the jury what the law is on the case. No. Mediators' sole role is to craft joint solutions to cases. You see, judges work for singularity. Mediators work for joint solutions. If your mediator acts like a judge, that red flag is one that's to tell you to get a new mediator. And if you want a judge solution, why go to mediation? Don't. You can always stay in the slow, plotting, impersonal court system. Fight like hell for a result, a singular result that, if you looked at rationally and logically, could have been done in a much simpler way by mediation. And I would suggest you be wary of mediators who do not know your area of law. In this case, it's tort law. Again, this happens a lot in the presumptive situation where you don't have as much control, but you should be able to pick up the phone if that happens and there's not a tort law background in your mediator, and you should be able to speak to the administrator of the ADR program and let them know that the mediator should be, for your cases, should be one who has worked in claims or in personal injury cases and had a practice. I would suggest that actually is very important, that the mediator has worked in the private sector. Nothing, in my opinion, beats real world experience. And this is another reason why mediators are, in my opinion, much more successful at resolution of cases. Sometimes judges have never worked in the private sector. They've been a law secretary, they've been a court officer, gone to law school, but they've never been in the practice of law. They've never experienced the ups, the downs, the cost issues, the happy client issues, and they've never had to make those adjustments. Mediators who have had practices understand all of that. Now, why is all of this important? Okay, you can't change history unless you're willing to take risks. You can't win a football game. You can't change 10 years of losing without being willing to take risks. History will fight like hell to avoid change. The way you create change is to focus on the relationship that you have with your opposition and focus on a better relationship with your opposition and a real relationship with the mediator. By doing this, by being focused and committed to create the environment that will reduce your caseload, save your client costs, and create certainty for yourself, you need to recognize that history is going to fight like hell to change, but it can be overcome. Be brave. Embrace the change. And there's another axiom to consider here. Fortune favors the bold and the brave. So be bold and mediate your way to a better life. If you want to be a part of the new order of doing things, create a new history for yourself and your caseload, If you want to fight the history of caseloads, of course, that keep rising, of delay after delay, of time-consuming discovery, and multitudes of appearances, and let's not forget the history of unhappy clients, you can. All you need to do is book a call with me. Go to www.smarttomediate.com/book a call, and let's start managing your caseload. Let's drill down into the differences between private and presumptive mediations. And there are major differences in the approach to the resolution of cases. Private mediators, they get an opportunity with you to create history. They're part of the creation process of creating a history for a case. Whereas presumptive mediations, they come in after the history of the case has existed for a long period of time, and the positions have been planted, rooted into the psyche of the attorneys and the adjusters over the years of hard work put into the developing case for trial purposes. You see, presumptive mediations, as they are now processed by the courts and set up, come into play when your case is on the trial calendar, a note of issue has been filed, and it's not unusual to find 30 or more items filed on the e-courts by the attorneys. I look at those lists and I just think of all the time that has been spent. There are likely motions involved that have delayed the placing of the case on the calendar for years, and even more current pending motions like summary judgment that will take up major time and create nothing but more and more hours of work and additional uncertainty. Wrong. I mean, presumptive mediations are good and a step in the right direction. And I'm happy that the New York courts have embraced it. But the timing of the presumptive mediation limits its effectiveness. And once you have done all that work, a party or carrier is much more likely to wait for the ultimate time to resolve the case, the ultimate time being jury selection, or even opt for the trial on the case. Hardened positions cannot be avoided when you have taken the court-heavy litigation model as your approach. Now, some would argue that presumptive mediations were more likely helpful to the court and to the judges than to the parties themselves. And too many times, cases are not settled at presumptive mediations. And this can be because of a multitude of reasons. Don't get me wrong, because a mediation that even doesn't resolve can at least eliminate some of the issues, and that will make it easier for the court to resolve the case with less time when it does come up for the actual trial. But hardened positions created by years of work and a multitude of appearances, even client expectations can change over time, depending on how they feel they have been treated and how they perceive their position through the testimony, expert examination, and the like. So time suffering on a case, time increasing on a case, time, multitudes of hours and hours spent on a case without a result doesn't always make a client want to settle. Many times, all it does is serve to harden the position of the client themselves into unreasonableness. Yet even with issues such as this, presumptive mediation is better than no mediation at all. And the courts are generally supportive of the presumptive mediation because a moved case is still marked as a settled case on that court calendar. I think one of the major problems with presumptive mediations is that currently in New York, a qualified certified mediator is required to give 90 minutes of uncompensated time to the resolution of the case. And this does not include any time also spent on review of the case and materials that are provided to the mediator prior to the mediation itself. I don't know. It just seems un-American to me. Maybe that's going too far. But pro bono at this level, I think is
not productive to the settlement of the case. I always say everyone should have skin in the game, and that includes the mediator, because a compensated mediator is motivated to resolve that case. Only after the lapse of 90 minutes of mediation time can a mediator be compensated for time spent. And at that point, it has to be agreed on by all the parties. Again, wasted time. Let me address this by first stating that the presumptive mediation panels have many, many good, qualified, certified mediators. The panel lists are available for review before, but for the most part, you, the attorney and the adjuster, really do not have a say in who the initial mediator is. That mediator is assigned by the ADR coordinator of the court. The vetting process is different from a private mediation firm. For example, like SSAM, a private mediation firm that I work for. And we will be sitting down with the CEO of that company soon to get that perspective firsthand. And in private mediation, the mediator can be requested by the parties or can be matched with your case. It is a process that involves a look at the history of that type of case, the history of who the insurance company is, the history of who the defense firm is, the history of who the plaintiff's firm is. And when you look at that history and the results of the countless mediations set up by the company, there is an emphasis placed upon resolution. Mediators are not only vetted for the case, but they are rated and surveyed by every case that they're on. And a company like SSAM takes that very seriously, and it prides itself on matching mediators with cases, mediators with law firms, mediators with insurance companies. And the mediators are always specialists in the type of case you are matched with. That's not always the case in presumptive mediation. You don't know about that matchup. Is the mediator a specialist in where your case lies and the type of case you have? The mediation company also values all the important things in mediation, such as integrity, honesty, confidentiality, and watches the process closely. And you must not overlook something else. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but it's called skin in the game. Everyone has skin in the game in a private mediation. The attorneys and the claims people are paying the mediator on a shared basis most of the time. The mediator is being compensated fairly for the time, for both preparation and mediation time. So there is a dedication to the attorneys and the claims personnel to help them do what is the most important thing for that mediator, which is to resolve the case. After all, mediators who get paid want to get repeat business, right? Makes sense, right? So they are going to work very, very hard to resolve that case at the right price. It's something that's going to make sense for everyone. The mediator is much more incentivized to create lasting and continuing relationships with the parties and between the parties because of the compensation aspect. And I also have found that a higher percentage of cases settle at private mediations than the presumptive mediations, for the reasons outlined above and for some very practical ones too. I recently had a mediation on the presumptive side where the plaintiff's attorney demanded $20 million. It turns out that the insurance available, even if the case had a value like that, was $10 million. And when I asked the plaintiff's attorney why he was demanding $20 million, was he aware that there was only a $10 million policy? He said, yes, I am. I just want them to know that I'm going to take this case to trial and I'm going to ask for $20 million. So in essence, we were wasting our time at that mediation. My time was being wasted and everyone else's time was being wasted. That was not a good mediation. So it is less likely hardened positions are formed when private mediations can be done at the beginning of the case. even before litigation, or if the case is in litigation, before the time-consuming discovery of document drenching or the EBTs, which contribute to both attorney position hardening and client indignation. If the parties did not hate the attorneys that either represented them or opposed them, and if they did not hate each other before the depositions, then I'm almost certain they will after depositions. Litigation is a time abuser and a money vacuum. It attributes greatly to the longevity of caseloads, but not the longevity of the life of the clients, attorneys, or adjusters. Mediation does address the longevity of the case and attributes to the longevity of the life of the clients, the attorneys, and the adjusters. And can't we agree that that's a good thing? So if you want to create your own history on a case or change the history that doing things the way, quote, it has always been done creates a history of wasted time, rising costs, never-ending caseloads, you have to be brave to change the way business has been traditionally done and create your own history on the case. Nolit timere, Latin for be not afraid. Remember this, history will favor the brave and the bold. And once you create the new history, history will favor you. So be brave and bold. Book a call with me. Like, subscribe, and share this podcast. You create the relationships that will make your work and family life better by doing that. And you can book the call with me at www.smarttomediate.com/book a call